For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, alongside Connor Morrissette for Instant Analysis from USC's Wednesday evening practice of the bye week. Connor, welcome back to Instant Analysis. Good to have you back here.
Thank you.
We had a week off. It's the bye week now, so we can relax a little bit. And it did feel like a little bit more of a low-key day today. There's no bombshell news that we're going to drop. But what were your overall observations from practice today?
Well, we can start with some of the guys who returned. Mason Cobb was back in pads, which was good to see. He did not practice yesterday. He did not play against Utah State. He was working off to the side from when we were in practice, so I don't think he's fully ready, but him being in a helmet, him being in pads is obviously encouraging, and Lincoln Riley said yesterday he expects Cobb to play against Michigan. Eric Gentry wasn't out there again today. Riley was asked yesterday about his status. He said he expects him to play against Michigan as well. Jalen Smith, who didn't play against Utah State, he was back out there today. Seems like he's fully ready to go. And one other thing, I'll just say Jacobe Lane didn't quite look like himself, and we can move on to what actually happened during practice. So the scout team defense from when we were in there, they were working against Miller Moss, the first team offensive line, and then all four running backs. They were working on some pitch plays. And Jack, you mentioned to me Brian Jackson stood out too, just the size of his legs. He got his first carries against Utah State. Really looks the part. A big physical runner. I'm excited for his future. And then Jaden Maeva worked with the starting wide receivers. They were in a bunch formation, and it was either a screen or a slant. And that moved really quickly because once that ended, they got back into warm-ups. It was regular position group stuff. From there, all the position coaches were working with their normal groups, unlike yesterday where we saw some rotation. But those were the biggest things that stood out to me. It looks like they're really prioritizing the run game against LSU. They won the game, of course, but I don't think Lincoln Riley loved what he saw from his running game there against Utah State. 249 yards, I think, on the ground, so they did well there, and they're still emphasizing that as they head into Michigan in about 10 days.
Thought it was pretty interesting, too, to see them working on pitches as well as running pitches against Utah State. Feels like something we haven't really seen in the first 2 years under Lincoln Riley, and obviously there's a lot of foils that you can do off the pitch. They tried to do, I think, something like that against LSU, didn't quite work, but seeing those pitch plays is something that I don't think I can remember in the last year or two.
Yeah. Something that's new, just like Miller Moss throwing to the tight ends, and we asked him, or McCree, after the game, like, why are the tight ends more involved this year? Is that something from the coaching staff? And Lake McCree just said no, it's been Miller Moss. So I think when you have different personnel and different coaches on the offense, it's a lot of the same guys. But even Luke Heward moving over to the quarterbacks, you can kind of get some different minds in there and different ideas. And this staff, they're brilliant on offense, obviously, and they just want to get the best out of their players. It's a new-look roster, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with it, the fact that it's new pieces. Caleb Williams now with the Chicago Bears, that changes the equation too.
Yeah, I almost wonder, too, if the speed of the running backs makes any kind of an impact. You know, some scouts think that Woody Marks might be the fastest running back in college. Obviously, Quentin Joyner's got a lot of speed, so maybe something about their speed allows them to get out of a pitch a little bit quicker. You never really know. That's one of the questions I think would be interesting to ask Lincoln Riley about. Didn't get to talk to him. That was yesterday, but today we talked to Danton Lynn, fresh off of a shutout, the first for USC since 2011. What stood out to you about what Lynn had to say?
Well, all offseason we've heard how good of a teacher he is. So he was asked today who taught you and who did such a good job mentoring you. And he mentioned Gus Bradley from when he was with the Chargers, Lynn. And Bradley was either the head coach or the defense coordinator. I think head coach there. And his eyes just lit up. He said he's a brilliant teacher. He's done an amazing job. And then he also brought up how he learned a lot from Wink Martindale, who is the Michigan defensive coordinator after spending a lot of time in the NFL with the Ravens, with the Giants. And it's funny, Jack, he said, yeah, our defenses stylistically might be similar, but if you have a playbook and it looks the same, what we call, and it just, you won't be able to tell that it's the same defense. He was asked, how nervous are you that Wink Martindale might know what you're thinking? And on the flip side, you might know what he's thinking. Does that go into this matchup at all? And he said a little bit, but not really, because everything is so versatile, and what we call it can be so different, even though some of the coaching trees that we've worked under have been similar. I thought that was a unique answer and something that stood out to me. He also talked about Anthony Lucas taking the next step, how the whole staff has worked to get him up to speed, and Gavin Meyer, how they brought him out of the portal from Wyoming a little bit later in the process, but they had a conversation for 90 minutes. Meyer talked about it on Tunnel Vision the other night. He said that's how football's supposed to be talked about. Lynn said today Gavin Meyer's knowledge of the game really stood out to him, and I mean, really impressed by Gavin, because he not only has come here a little bit late, like I said, but he's a starter after not going through spring practice. He had an amazing fall camp, and he was one of the highest PFF-graded defensive players for USC against Utah State and LSU. He's fit in really well. Last season, could USC have gotten the production of someone who joined so late, especially at that position? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think it's almost interesting that Danton Lynn wasn't as heralded a hire when USC brought him over, not only because of all the things we've heard from him as a coach and as a person and his ability to teach these kids, but also because of that scheme that he brought over, it's taking over kind of all of football. You see it with the Chargers now with Jim Harbaugh. The Ravens have had it for a while. Michigan has started to instill that steam now. USC's got it. It's kind of that next scheme that coaches want to get their hands on. It's the fad right now, I guess you could say. So I was a little surprised that we've heard so many great things about Danton Lynn, seen the work he's been able to do, all these coaches coming out of the woodworks to talk about how impactful he's been and everything like that. It's interesting how under the radar that hire went, considering he brought over his personality, his ability to teach, and one of the schemes that obviously all these schools are running and even NFL programs.
Yeah, if he continues the way he's going, I mean, I'm sure he'll get calls from the NFL, calls maybe in college to be the head coach. And I asked him, do you have head coach aspirations one day? And he said down the line, but I'm focused here at USC, obviously. And then he mentioned how coaching college kids right now, it's only his second year. It's the most fun he's ever had in the profession. And that was really cool to hear because he has more NFL experience. And he said, when you're in the NFL, it's just football. Here, you wear a whole lot of different hats. And just the fact that he's having so much fun. And who wouldn't have fun when your defense is as good as it's been at UCLA, now here at USC? I don't blame him for having fun. I feel like, Jack, earlier on when we heard from Lynn before the season and even after LSU, he was still a little bit guarded. But 2 games in on Trojans Live, he seemed more relaxed. Today he spoke for longer than he's ever spoken to us. He's feeling good, and it's deserved because that defense, man, they are really good.
Yeah, you almost wonder if he figured they were going to be pretty good, but he didn't want to come out guns a-blazing, just perfectly assuming it was going to work. And I think because it's been so good in the first couple of weeks, obviously, it's you want to talk about something that's been so good like the defense has been. One of the young players that he talked about, Cameron Fountain, there was a video between them that was shown on the broadcast, is them two celebrating after the missed field goal, Lynn showing a lot of emotion. He was asked about that today, and he mentioned when you talk about being in college with some of these kids, Cameron Fountain was the second home visit he ever went on as a recruiter at USC. So he's able to build those relationships with these kids, see it through. And, if you're leaving to go be a head coach or go to the NFL potentially, you don't get to see through the college careers of guys like that. So could be something that's on the mind of Danton Lynn. But I think if he continues to have success, like you mentioned, a head coach gig could be potentially in his future.
Yeah, it's probably too early to even talk about that. But just the way it's going right now, and then you see how the schedule lines up, there isn't really a scary offense outside of maybe Penn State the rest of the way, maybe Nebraska, but they were shut out the second half of Colorado. Getting ahead of myself here, I understand. But they have a chance to have a really special defensive season. Forget about the schedule, just because they're really talented, and what they've done has been so impressive. I said it on the podcast today with Ryan, and unless some crazy injuries hit this team, I don't envision this defense taking any step back or there being these big coverage busts or just mistakes. They're going to make teams earn every yard, and if they get beat, it's not like, USC lost this game. I really feel after 2 games, USC, if they do lose, and it's because of that defensive side of the ball, the offense will just better execute that defense, and that's Lynn. I said it today. He's a cheat code. He is incredible as a defensive coach.
We got to talk to a handful of defensive players today. Who would you like to start with?
We can start with Jamil Muhammad. We were both in that scrum, and you asked him about what, as a pass rusher, is the most significant stat that he looks out for, and he couldn't really name an answer. He said that's a good question for Pro Football Focus. I thought that was pretty funny. I asked him about the discipline of the team and just how they've only had 1 defensive penalty so far, and that was one that could have gone either way against LSU. Anthony Lucas, he did go offside, but then it looked like he got back, and LSU false started. That's really been it for USC. And he talked about Muhammad did just all the reps, and he brought up a quote from Nick Saban about how you don't want to do something until you get it right. You do it until you can't get it wrong. That stood out to me. And just the defensive staff, I tried to point the question, this staff has gotten you so prepared, and he went back to how hungry the returners are to play better defense, and they're better disciplined and just playing better. Yeah, the staff helps, of course, but it's that hunger. That's the biggest factor, and that's why, maybe not the biggest reason, but that's one of the main reasons they've turned this thing around, and that stood out to me as well. I feel like we give the staff so much credit, but we got to give the players some credit too. A lot of the guys who were there last year, Eric Gentry, Jamil Muhammad, Jacobe Covington, he was hurt a little bit, but some guys who played a lot, Mason Cobb, it's just night and day.
Yeah, Anthony Lucas is a guy that I would throw in that category too. We were supposed to get him today, but he had to run off to class since practice ran a little bit long. Did get to talk to Gavin Meyer. He mentioned a lot of the things that he brought up on the House of Victory interview with you and Ryan, talking about that meeting with Danton Lynn, how that's the way football should be talked about. And he said he and Lynn were sitting there watching film, and Lynn would pause it and say, okay, what did you see on that play? Why is this guy doing this? Why is that guy doing that? I wanted to ask him if he got a little nervous and if it felt like a test where he had to get the right answer or else. else. And the interview ended before I could ask him that. But he just said that he really valued that experience and really doubled down on what he talked about with you and Ryan. And there was a lot of praise for Gavin Meyer today as a guy that has come in. He's become a starter. He had that big deflection that led to the Easton Mascarenas Arnold interception, and it seems like he's part of the blueprint of that defense as well this year. He's really got his fingerprints in there.
He's been rock solid. Another blueprint of that defense. Jacobe Covington locked down one of those starting cornerback spots. Because there was so much action today, Desmond Stevens spoke, which we'll talk about in a second, and Gavin Meyer, and there were a lot of guys talking at once. I pretty much got a one-on-one interview with Jacobe Covington, which was really cool. I asked him, which you're probably not supposed to ask because they don't like it, but I said, was it part of the game plan against LSU to play so far off those receivers, especially in the first half? And he just said, yeah, and then kind of said, next question, we can move on from there. That was something that we were asked a lot, Jack. Like, the big concern with the defense, okay, yeah, they played well, but why were the guys playing so far off? It comes back to the bend but don't break. We're going to make you earn every yard. If you take a 5-yard check down or a 7-yard check down, so be it. But on 2nd and 3, 3rd and 3, you're going to have to earn it. And against LSU, USC did a great job of making them earn it, and they didn't earn it. That's why USC won 27-20. So hearing him admit to just that game plan feature, I thought was unique. And then I asked him a lot about the staff and how Coach Belk and Coach Lynn, what they emphasized when they first got here, and it was fundamentals, just like we heard Mason Cobb talk about with Matt Entz. This was a complete overhaul, not just from bringing in new coaches, but like they started from square one with these guys, and a lot of them are really talented, so they picked it up fast, but it was fundamentals from the beginning. And then they get into the scheme, and Lynn talked so much about how in the spring he would move really slowly, but now in the fall with Kamari Ramsey and John Humphrey, guys who were in the scheme last year, USC's been able to do more with this defense at USC because they've had some teachers built in from UCLA, like I said, Ramsey and Humphrey. So just hearing Covington talk about that was really unique. I definitely recommend checking that out. He's a guy who's had to wait his turn, injuries, just a lot of people in the cornerback room, and for him to win a job in this loaded cornerback room, I think says a lot about his talent, and I'm really excited to watch him the rest of the way.
And to wrap it up with Desmond Stevens, it's a freshman we've heard a lot about, and he got to talk for the first time today. USC giving us a couple of true freshmen this week during the bye week is pretty cool. What stood out to you about what Desmond Stevens had to say?
He said it was electrifying to make his debut as a special teamer against LSU in Allegiant Stadium, and then he played his first reps at linebacker against Utah State. He said that was good. The most interesting thing from him, Jack, he was supposed to be a safety. He played safety in college, or in high school, not in college, plays linebacker in college, and that helped prepare him to be a Mike linebacker because he was getting a lot of the checks and doing a lot of calling on the high school level, as much as you can at that level, but he was kind of the leader of his high school defense, which makes sense. Then he just kept getting bigger and bigger, so he couldn't really be a safety anymore, and now as the backup Mike linebacker to Easton Mascarenas Arnold, I think his high school experience and being a safety, even though it wasn't the same position that he plays now, has helped him to be that Mike linebacker of the future for USC. Because remember, Easton Mascarenas Arnold, he only has this is his last year of eligibility, so USC is going to need a new Mike next season, and it looks like Stevens is in line to take that job over.
Yeah, there will probably be a lot of jobs that open up, a lot of redshirt seniors on this team, a lot of guys that are raising their draft stock, whether that is a guy like Anthony Lucas, who maybe last year you say, okay, this guy has a couple more years at USC. If he continues to play the way that he is and takes the jump that Lincoln Riley is expecting, that could be a guy that gets drafted pretty highly. And there's a lot of guys that I think you could say the same thing about on this USC defense. So, maybe that's Danton Lynn as well. We'll see. But if you're USC, you want to keep as many pieces from this defense as you can, at least from what you've seen through 2 weeks. We'll get into next week a little bit more about Michigan, because it's obviously the reigning national champion, but I think this is another week the USC defense can have some real success against a Michigan offense that really hasn't found anything and just got walloped by Texas. But anything else before we wrap it up and kind of head on to next week, wrap up this bye week with a bow?
Well, just to your point about NFL guys on defense, I think when the season started, I looked at Kamari Ramsey and I was like, I think he has an NFL future, but then it was a lot of question marks. Anthony Lucas, could he get there? Yeah, but I want to see it. Eric Gentry, could he get there after up and down last season? Yeah, but I want to see it. And through 2 games, it's like, okay, Anthony Lucas, he looks like a draft pick. Eric Gentry, he certainly looks like a draft pick. Bear Alexander, we earmarked as a draft pick as well. It's amazing how quickly, with some good performances, and you get the right coaches in here, some guys who have potential, they're realizing that potential, and all of a sudden USC goes from, okay, they might have a few draft picks on defense to, if they keep playing really well, this could be a unit that not only wins a lot of games for USC, but these guys have long careers at the next level. And I mean, that's football. One coaching change can open up so much, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, or a bunch of hires on the defensive staff. Yeah. The spirits are definitely changing here at USC. Lots of people excited about the program. They have to lower those excitement levels this week. Watch other teams play football on Saturday. It's kind of weird to have a bye this early into the season without a week 0 game being played by USC, but they'll rest for this week, go to Michigan next week, and then get ready to kind of move through that middle part of the schedule that could have some tests that maybe we're not expecting yet, because last week we said Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, well, these are all huge tests. 1 week later, and people are not expecting those to be as big of tests, but a team like Nebraska could pump up and surprise you. You never really know. We could say all these great things here in the bye week after 2 weeks, and it could all come crashing down. You never really know. That's kind of the beauty of football. But enjoy the Saturday off. Thank you guys for joining us for Instant Analysis here during the bye week. He's Connor Morrissette. I'm Jack Smith. Make sure you're checking out USCfootball.com for more.